Alliance Special Forces, also known as the Rebel Alliance Special Forces Corps and better known as Special Forces, was a branch of the Alliance military that was attached to Alliance High Command, specifically selected for high skill, morale, bravery, and dedication to the rebel cause. Special Forces soldiers were either from subjugated worlds or were Imperials disillusioned by the government's tyranny. Rebel forces tended to be more individualistic and ragtag than the forces of the Imperial military. Special Forces should not be confused with Special Operations, which was groups that participated in murky undercover missions that typically involved investigating, snooping, and hectic seat-of-the-pants assignments, with minimal input for the Alliance command. There was a deep rivalry between the two branches. Although Special Forces members recognized the need for special operations, and some considered them capable soldiers, they tended to think of Special Operations agents as amateurs who relied on luck to complete their missions. Likewise, Special Operations agents tended to regard their counterparts as a group of arrogant, overtrained grunts with overinflated opinions of their own importance. Very few regular soldiers were capable of becoming Special Forces troopers, and all volunteered for service. Imperial Special Forces candidates underwent an intensive examination to determine political, physical, educational, technical, and mental stability. They also performed excessive background checks, which included interviews of families, friends, and acquaintances to ensure political loyalty. The Alliance did its best to perform background checks, but it was limited by the ability to perform interviews of relatives and associates. The Special Forces vetting process was run by Alliance intelligence and comprised mainly of interviews, interrogations, and examinations. The vetting process was given high priority and resulted in low penetration of organization by Imperial agents. The Empire's anti-alien stance gave the Alliance an advantage in creating Special Forces, giving them a large pool of non-human candidates eager to oppose the new order. Many of these species possessed abilities particularly suited to convert into military operations. In addition, the Empire's oppressive rule caused many humans to seek service within the Alliance, allowing for a more selective recruitment policy for Special Forces. Special Forces candidates had already undergone basic and specialist trainings. Once selected for Special Forces, the troopers would go through another round of advanced training at a drop camp. The trainees were taught advanced skills essential for Special Forces service, but the primary purpose of this phase of training was to weed out candidates lacking the drive to succeed in their missions. The standards in every area of training were high, and the dropout rate was equally high. Many Alliance regular troopers were Special Forces washouts, though there was no stigma attached to such failure. Simply having been accepted onto a Special Forces training group was a mark of troopers' superior qualities, and many failed candidates went on to have successful careers with the Alliance military. Basic Special Forces training included 2 months of heavy weapon drills using blasters, heavy weaponry, hand weapons, and slug throwers. They also performed numerous deployment scenarios, including stealth drills, overland marches, and paracel and dropship deployments. The exercises would increase in intensity and difficulty as the trainees progressed through the program, and included 5 live-fire drills and failure-rigged reenactments. This stage of training concluded with a realistic wargame scenario, the completion of which meant advancement into a further 4 weeks of special agents training. In addition to military training, recruits attended lectures on military history. For specialization training, recruits were sent to another training camp where they were trained in a particular area of expertise depending on their natural attributes and proficiencies. This training built on the specific areas learned in basic Special Forces training and prepared them for assignments of one of the many specialized regiments within the Special Forces division. The identity of Special Forces recruits was a high-level secret. If the enemy discovered their identities, personality profiles were to be constructed for themselves and their family and friends, so they could not be targeted by the enemy. The trainee ID card also carried a hollow flat, rank, and security clearance code. The Special Forces were the ground troops of the Alliance to restore the Republic, assigned to fleets to be sent on detached duties to sectors that needed them. Infantry platoons of Special Forces were organized into formal units, much like how the Imperial Navy was. But in the field they were divided into task force, consisting of many soldiers and as much equipment needed to carry out a specific military objective. The average Special Forces trooper was a few years older than a regular rebel soldier, and had above average physical and mental ability, and were dedicated to the Alliance and its cause. While they tended to be a little wild in their private lives, when in the field they generally were extremely professional. Like most Alliance soldiers, Special Forces troops were idealistic and committed to the rebellion against the Empire. although they tended to be even more dedicated. A great number of them were former soldiers of the Empire. Special Forces troopers were trained in a variety of tactics, easily adapting to different environments, and finding different ways to cover and hold a position in any situation. Hand blasters were standard for every soldier, but some divisions had even been known to specialize in particular equipment for some of their most dangerous missions. Special Forces spent most of their time training, maintaining their equipment, and traveling. The boredom of preparation was punctuated by moments of extreme danger and stress. When Special Forces troopers were called up for action, their tours of duty tended to be short and extremely unpleasant in contrast to the regular tours that were generally longer and carried a low level of danger. The major difference between regular and Special Forces soldiers was that the latter actively sought trouble more frequently and was expected to function reliably. A large percentage of human Special Forces officers were ex-Imperial military officers, who were extensively screened by Alliance intelligence. They were generally a little bit younger than regular military officers, especially towards the high ranks. The nature of Special Forces often meant that advancement was faster than regular forces, partially because of a higher rate of attrition. Special Forces officers were highly intelligent, creative, and physically fit. They were among the finest military officers in the galaxy during the Rebellion era. Special Forces was organized into formal units much like its Imperial counterparts: divisions, regiments, companies, platoons, squads, and fighting teams. However, due to scarcity of resources, they rarely operated as full units. Instead, they were organized into task force, consisting of the appropriate number of soldiers required for a certain mission. Special Forces consisted of about 10 divisions. One division, called Command Division, was under General Crix Madden, and was attached to Alliance High Command at all times. It processed regiments representing all Special Forces specializations. They were assigned to various elements of High Command. 5 other divisions were all located more or less regionally, with the balance deployed as rogue divisions operationally attached to sector commands, or other Special Forces divisions as needed. The regionally located divisions were commanded by a general. The rogue divisions were theoretically under the command of whatever divisional general they were assigned to, but in practice they were primarily commanded by the colonels of the regiment. Regiments were often made into 3 to 6 companies and were commanded by a colonel, less often a major. They were consistently numbered within each division by the type of specialist they provided. Like divisions that were more an accounting unit than actually saw action, they provided the pool from which task forces were assembled. Notable regiments being the 2nd Regiment and the 4th Regiment. The 2nd Regiment, or the Special Forces Pathfinders, made clandestine drops into enemy territory, establishing beachheads, performing reconnaissance, and holding territory until reinforcements arrived. These sorts of operations were typically conducted by a fairly small task force, no larger than company size. The task force were often in great danger since they could easily be annihilated if they were not relieved or extracted before the enemy could mount an effective counterattack. The secondary role of Pathfinder specialization was to scout to the other Special Forces units in the ground operations. These missions were also conducted by small units, although there was at least little backup if anything went wrong. Pathfinders were trained for survival, alien species connections, and repulsor craft operation. They were normally equipped with blaster rifles, grenades, and survival equipment, while they often fielded heavy weapons and repulsor craft for superior mobility. Pathfinder troops relied on surprise to overwhelm enemy forces. The Special Forces Wilderness Fighters, or the 4th Regiment, and sometimes called Rangers, were trained to use their terrain for best tactical advantage in fighting. They were more mobile than their urban counterparts of the 3rd Regiment, and often equipped with an A280 and A295 blaster rifles. Since there are so many different types of terrain, companies specialize for specific combat conditions: Arctic, aquatic, jungle/forest, mountain, desert, and plains. White uniform rangers trained to work in cold terrain were present during the Battle of Endor, and stealthy forest camouflage rangers struck at the Battle of Endor. The Wilderness Regiment within a division tended to be spread a little thinner than others. Alliance bases were more than often located in deep wilderness on isolated worlds, as far from the Imperial center as possible, and therefore wilderness fighters were often assigned to these bases when not engaged in active operations to reinforce sector force troopers. Wilderness fighters were typically issued with blasters and survival packs. Since they were expected to be very mobile, wilderness fighters would often use repulsor craft such as speeder bikes, skiffs, and hover tanks. Wilderness regiments were the only Special Forces branch to maintain repulsor tanks without the involvement of troop specialization, and they were trained to use heavy weapon and artillery to reduce their reliance on heavy weapon specialists. Though bearing similar names, Special Forces and Alliance Special Operations were two completely different groups. While Special Forces were highly trained active military professionals tasked with performing specific, careful planned operations, Special Operations agents engage in murky undercover missions and chaotic, unplanned operations with only minimal input from Alliance Command. Though Special Forces personnel recognized the need for Special Operations and vice versa, the rivalry between the two groups ran deep. Special Forces personnel reviewed the Special Operations as spooks, as they like to call them, as amateurs that relied on luck to carry the day, while Special Operations personnel viewed Special Forces as arrogant, uptight, and overtrained. Special Forces sometimes use mission group personnel as other specialists, such as transportation specs, pilots, communication experts, translators, medical technicians, supply lanes, and so on. Such personnel was often referred to as recovering spooks by the Special Forces units they were attached to. Conversely, sometimes Special Forces troops were assigned to Special Operation units. These individuals were referred to as specters by other Special Forces personnel. That's all I have for today for this lore video on the Alliance Special Forces. I do think the Alliance Special Operations sounds very interesting, so if you guys want me to make a video on that, I will. And thank you for making it to the end of this video. And after this, there will be a lore video on Obi-Wan Kenobi in his first year of the Clone Wars Legends. I hope you guys like that as well, and if you do, you can tell me if there's any other Jedi you'd like to learn about. So basically the series would be on what the Jedi did in that first year of the Clone Wars, because there was the Clone Wars animated series from 2003, I believe, and that covered some of this, but the Clone Wars computer animated show didn't do anything with that. And I'm not going to be putting out my discussion video on Battlefront 2 this Saturday, like I said in the end of the mall video. It will probably be next Saturday, just because I don't think I'm going to be able to make 4 videos this week. And if you like this video, please comment, like, and share. And don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in my next video, but until then, may the Force be with you.